Hi, Molly. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Callie?
I'm doing all right. You look so great sitting outside in the sun.
Thank you.
So, just real quickly, for anybody tuning in, we're starting something new here at Women's Resources during this time to reach out and educate our clients and the community in general. So, first, Molly, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do at Women's Resources.
Yeah, so I'm Molly. I'm the sexual assault counselor. And so my role is to really to help people who are survivors to get through that crisis point. So we typically offer short-term crisis counseling. So we're the people that can meet you in the hospital right after an assault has happened. Our agency does provide medical accompaniment so that you have someone to go to the hospital with you. Um, if you decide to report and move forward with an investigation and a forensic exam. And then after that, we also provide counseling, ongoing counseling as needed. So I can work with survivors around developing coping skills, establishing a support system, safety planning, and also kind of advocating for them and working them through the process of um, criminal justice issues, helping them kind of understand what the process looks like and how they want to move forward and make sometimes very difficult decisions around that. So that's my role. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks for explaining that so well. And I'll just introduce myself really quick. I am the communications specialist at Women's Resources, and I do a lot of our social media, our graphics, any way that you see Women's Resources in print or on the web is I'm behind that. Okay, great. So I guess one of the first things we could talk about is April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Could you tell us a little bit about that and why it's so important that we have an awareness month?
Yeah, so awareness I think is important for a couple different reasons. I think first and foremost, it helps survivors feel like they're not alone. I think that there are a lot of cases where maybe it's even difficult to identify that you are a survivor. And I think that having awareness about what sexual assault is, defining that, defining things like consent, um, and also the number of people who have been affected by this. I think sexual assault awareness helps educate people in that manner, and helps it really, I think, helps survivors come together. There's so many different events that have taken place, um, that have brought survivors together and brought people who want to support survivors together. And I think that that sense of community is something that Sexual Assault Awareness Month really brings to the community. And I also think that there are a lot of people that have started to recognize how big of an issue sexual violence is. And they want to help and they want to support people, but they're not exactly sure how. And I think that Sexual Assault Awareness Month helps educate those people who maybe haven't been directly impacted by it, but have loved ones or significant others that have been impacted. And it helps give really good factual information on how to help people and how to support people.
Amazing. Yeah. Um, Now, obviously, it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, but beyond that, we're all going through this coronavirus pandemic right now. So, what are some particular coping skills that you would suggest for sexual assault survivors during this time when a lot of us feel so isolated?
Right. So I think that my big go-to is self-awareness and recognizing that you're even in a state of high stress. So I think that when you can reflect and just say to yourself, like, okay, I'm overwhelmed right now, or I'm stressed out, or I'm feeling triggered, or whatever it is, being able to simply acknowledge your emotions is really, really important. And once you've done that and you can say, okay, I'm stressed out, I need a coping skill. Um, Coping skills are going to look a little bit different for everyone. Everyone has coping skills that work for them and that don't work for them. And in times of very high stress, sometimes you need to change them up too. So having a good handful of them is important. Um, some good coping skills that I would recommend would be reaching out to a friend, or a supportive person that you can trust to talk to. I think that's really important, not feeling alone in these times. Um, So that's one of the big things that I try to work with survivors on is like, who can you trust to talk to that you don't feel judged by, that you feel supported by? And then I also think that breathing techniques and any kind of breath work can be really helpful. I can actually do a little breathing technique at the very end of this video, or we can put a link in or something. Um, there's a really simple breathing technique called 4 square breathing, and it works in 16 seconds to de-escalate you and kind of relax the nervous system. And so that's a really good one to use, but there's all kinds of different breathing techniques. You can look things up on YouTube and do different types of breath work to relax the body and relax the mind. I also find that art can be a really good and healing way to express some of the emotions. And we'll have some art workshops that we're going to post up on Facebook, hopefully in the next weeks or the coming weeks. So that can be really helpful for survivors to reach out and use. But it doesn't have to be a full-blown art workshop either. It can just be doodling, taking your pen and paper and doodling or scribbling or writing down some words that express how you're feeling. Reading a book can also be really helpful. Sometimes it's really hard to get yourself out of what it is your crisis is about, or get yourself out of those heavy emotions. So reading a book that kind of lightens it up a little bit, takes your mind out of that where you have to pay attention to the words, and it takes you kind of out of this space that can feel very overwhelming and chaotic. I also find that journaling is a really, really good activity to do to cope with some of the heaviness of what's going on. And getting outside is a really big one too. Being able, and you guys can see that I'm a nature lover here. But I really think that being outside, being in the fresh air, feeling the sun, feeling the wind, it helps us feel connected to something bigger. And I think that that is a really healing and grounding way to cope and bring yourself down a little bit from the heaviness.
Yeah, those are all great coping skills. But what if somebody is doing that and they're really trying, but they're still not able to cope? What should they do if they're still really, really struggling? How can they get further help?
I would say calling our hotline. We do have a 24-hour hotline, and that's always a really good resource. And if you call our hotline, then you can talk with a trained counselor, and they can help you come up with a coping skill or a safety plan that is really going to work for your specific needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is really important because coping is such a personal and unique experience. So being able to talk to people or talk to a professional about what your experience is and what your interests are can really be helpful, because a professional can get a little bit more creative and offer you some more resources and support around that.
Wonderful. Molly, what would you say to somebody that's feeling hesitant about calling the hotline for the first time?
I think that calling the hotline for the first time can be an intimidating experience because you don't always know what you're going to get on the other end. But all of our counselors go through a pretty extensive training to be able to offer the support that they are able to support, or that they are able to offer. And I think that overall, our philosophy is really based in believing survivors and supporting survivors. So there shouldn't be a fear of feeling like you're not going to be believed. I think that that can be one of the big things that comes up for survivors, is that worry that they're going to be judged, or they're not going to be believed, or somebody's not going to understand them. And what I can say for all of our volunteers and all of our staff, I truly believe that we all are really dedicated to believing survivors and supporting survivors. So if that is one of the things that's coming up and causing hesitation, I just want to validate that all of our counselors that are answering the hotline are able to support you in that, and to believe you and support you in really whatever way you feel like you need to be supported. We can help you with that.
Absolutely. And that's great to hear. And Molly, I know another thing that we've kind of touched upon is you don't have to wait till it gets really bad to reach out. We want you,
absolutely.
right? Yeah.
I think that's a common experience. I think we tend to downplay what we're feeling and we tend to power through and just deal with it. And really, what we're often doing is just avoiding how we feel. And then it gets to a point where we've avoided it for so long that it's overflowing, it's too big to deal with. And at that point, you're almost going into a crisis state, or you're at a much higher level than you needed to get to before you reached out. So it's always better to reach out sooner rather than later. We're here. We're ready to talk to you. We would love to talk to you and support you. So use our services, because that's why we're here.
Yeah. And just a reminder, while we're on the topic of our hotline, just a reminder that it is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and completely free and completely confidential. So there's no reason not to call. Okay. Now, during this time, I'd like to kind of address the pandemic that we're going through, COVID-19. So why is it that change and this kind of crisis, this global crisis we're all going through, why is it that change can feel triggering for sexual assault survivors?
So when you're going through a stress response, like the stress responses that are being caused by COVID-19, your sympathetic nervous system turns on. And that what I mean by that is that there's certain hormones and certain things that are happening in your brain that cause your body to feel very tense, feel very overwhelmed, have the physical symptoms of anxiety. Maybe that is racing thoughts or shortness of breath, not being able to focus on things. And when that's the case, when your body starts to feel that and respond to that, it can remind your body of the same response that it had when you were assaulted or harassed. And so it can bring you back to that moment. So even though maybe you were assaulted long ago and you felt like you are in a really good healing place and you have your coping skills and you're doing really well and you're not getting triggered, it's very normal and very natural to take a couple steps back and to feel like all of a sudden all of your trauma is all of a sudden very present for you. And so I think that we can doubt ourselves in that, and we can kind of even not be so kind to ourselves when we start feeling like, I thought I had a handle on this, and now all of a sudden it's feeling fresh and all these wounds are reopened. But that's a very normal experience when you're going through something so stressful like this pandemic. All of that comes back, and it's just your body's natural response. It's just your body kind of going back to that stress response. And so going back to the coping skills and being able to maybe switch up your coping skills a little bit, or to work with a counselor and go a little bit deeper in the healing process and come up with a plan that's really going to work for you and to address not only the needs that you have as a survivor, but the needs that you have as a human being going through this change on this planet right now. There's a lot going on in that, and it's magnifying the stress response. So it can be triggering, and that's not, that doesn't mean that you're not doing your emotional work and that you haven't made the progress that you've made. It doesn't take away from that in any way. It just means that you need a little extra support right now, and we're here to give you that if you need it.
What should someone do if they are assaulted during this pandemic? You know, what if they're feeling scared to go to the hospital? What if they're feeling scared to overwhelm already overwhelmed hospital systems? What would your response be to somebody that's
and so this is a tricky question, because deciding what a survivor wants to do is an extremely personal choice. And so I think in a picture perfect world, a survivor would reach out to us and to kind of be able to talk through what their hesitations are, what their concerns are, what they hope to get out of the process, and to be able to make that decision with a supportive person who can walk them through exactly what that might look like. Because it is such a unique and personal experience and such a personal choice to make. So as of right now, the way that we're operating, under normal circumstances, we would be able to go into the hospitals and have in-person support there for a survivor. If they were assaulted and they chose to report it to the police and move forward with an investigation, the police would most likely encourage them to go to the hospital to have a forensic exam done. Under the way that we're currently operating, we're not able to provide that in-person support, but we are able to be on the phone the entire time if that's what they want, to provide that support, to advocate with police, if that's what the survivor wants, to walk them through the process and answer any questions, and also just be like a supportive listener for whatever it is that they need to talk about at that time. So it's a little bit different than what we would normally do, but there is still support. You're not going to be completely on your own if you do choose to move forward with that. And that being said, survivors still can go to the hospital if they want to. If you're assaulted right now and you're ready to report it to the police and you want to move forward with an investigation, going to the hospital is still an option. But of course it comes with those safety concerns. So that's something that a survivor would have to consider before moving forward. And we can do some advocacy around that. If there's a survivor that isn't sure what they want to do, they can call and we can talk through the possibilities. But it is an extremely difficult decision to make right now. And I don't know that there's a clear answer. There's never a clear answer. There's never a right or a wrong answer with what a survivor wants to do. I do want to note that there is a company that's selling at-home testing kits. So it's essentially, it's this idea that you can do a forensic exam on your own by collecting evidence at home. And while that sounds like a really good option, it's not advisable. We don't recommend using that because it can't address some of the physical and mental health issues that can go along with sexual assault. And it also doesn't necessarily meet the regulations for the Pennsylvania laws that exist around different guidelines for collecting evidence like that. So that is something that I want to mention because in a perfect world, something like that would work, but our world is not perfect. And so those at-home test kits are not recommended, and they're not a solution as a replacement for going to the hospital.
Yeah. Wow. I had heard about those, but I'm really glad you brought that up because it does seem like like you said, a great solution, but just not at this time. So to break things up a little bit, I see a furry friend roaming around in the background.
Yes. Can you see her? This is Penny. Yep.
Hi.
She's having some fun in the sun right now.
Yeah.
Just enjoying the fresh breeze.
Very nice. All right, a little bit more about SAM, or Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Can you just we hear this word consent a lot, but can you really define what it is and what it isn't and why it is so important?
So consent is this idea that we need to be giving and getting permission for things to happen. And this can be verbal or non-verbal, but it has to be very clear and very specific. And it has to be ongoing. So consent is not meant to be used as like a blanket permission to do something. It has to be communicated on a regular basis. So if there's something that I'm okay with on Monday, that doesn't automatically mean I'm going to be okay with it on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So that idea of having it ongoing, I think, is a really important component that we need to be talking about. And I think what consent does, and being really mindful about getting consent and giving consent, opens the lines of communication to protect people from getting hurt, because nobody can read minds in any way. And so being able to say, is this okay? We can stop if this is uncomfortable for you, or opening the lines of communication up in that way makes sure that everybody is having a good experience. And so I think that's why it's important, so that there is no miscommunication of any kind, that everybody is on the same page when they're engaging in anything, but especially in sexual activity. This is really an important concept for people to understand, to make sure that people feel safe, and to make sure that there are no miscommunications. So the more specific you can get, the more clear you can get, and the more we can have conversations about what is okay and not okay, I think the more peaceful the world will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. I think that brings us kind of to the end of most of our questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Molly, or throw in?
I think just to again validate that whatever people are feeling right now, whether you're a survivor or someone who's trying to support a survivor, or if you're just interested in general about this topic, this is a really triggering time, and I think it's really important for us to all be taking care of ourselves and to know that whatever you're feeling is completely normal. Um, it's a rough time, and things are changing a lot, but what I see is a lot of people finding new ways to support each other, and I think that that might be one of the positive things that's coming out of this, that things have changed and things have adapted, and we're finding new ways to support survivors just by being online and working from home. Like it is possible to still provide support, and that we are still very much here for survivors in any way that we can be, and just I think it's important for people to not hesitate to reach out. Just because the world is different doesn't mean that we as an agency at Women's Resources have gone anywhere or are going anywhere. So we're here if you need us.
Yes, yeah. And the clients that you have had, you still have sessions with them just over the phone. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. And so a lot of people have been able to adapt really easily to that. There can be some concerns around safety depending on what your at-home situation looks like. So one thing that I have been able to do with a lot of my clients is kind of work on just safety planning around doing sessions over the phone. So for some people, it's better for them to go to their car or go outside, or go to a friend's house to be able to have that private and personal space to talk. And for other people, it's a really easy transition. People that are living alone or they're already in very safe and secure situations, it's been a pretty easy transition. But if for whatever reason you're not feeling safe in your living situation and you're at home with a lot of people, don't let that be a reason that you don't call, because there are ways that we can kind of suggest ways to work around that. And a lot of the time, even if it feels challenging, usually we can find a way to communicate safely.
Yeah, that's great to know. And at this point, are you taking on any more clients?
Yes, absolutely. We're still taking new clients. We're actually in the process of training some counselors. So we are still moving forward completely with all of our services. We are taking new clients. So people can absolutely call for support.
That's wonderful. So if somebody wanted to become a client, they should call the hotline?
Yes, absolutely. It's better to call during business hours, our 24-hour hotline. You can call for support at any time if you just want to talk, but when you're scheduling an appointment, it is better to call during business hours, because then we can get you connected with our senior counselor who can schedule that appointment with you.
Okay, great. And business hours are just 9 to 5?
Yep, Monday through Friday.
Okay, very good. I guess the other thing I want to point out is there is a page on our website. It's wrmonroe.org/COVID-19 that lists a lot of different resources specific to what a survivor might go through while they are at home. And we are constantly updating that and adding more resources to that. I'll provide a link below for that as well. Anything else to add, Molly?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this interview with me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kelly.